Forestry.
So, obviously my name is Buehler, so everybody gets one joke a day, and then I start charging you $1. All right, so I'm from the city of Marshfield, and talking about our forestry program, and it's kind of an ever-growing thing. Obviously, it's both literally and figuratively. A brief history. We started in 2008 by contracting out to Blue Stem. And then that was all handheld GPSs and cameras taking photos. That was kind of a major thing, was taking a photo so that it can be linked to that point. And then the guys could see and print out that photo with that report and then go to the field. And then 2011, we got our ELA. We're one of the fortunate communities to have one. And then we all moved into SDE and then got published out. And has a Flash-based web editor and then things like that. Well, and then we slowly moved up to where we are today, where we're using Collector and GIS Online and Web App Builder. Our two departments that predominantly maintain this is our Street Division and our Park and Recs. They both have different slight needs, but they do work very well together. And actually, it's the Street Department, our Street Division, that is really kind of driving this collection in the field, right there, right now kind of thing. And it's been a real asset to have younger people and come in and try to buck the system to get new ways of doing stuff instead of the printed map and the report, which may have been good enough for the old guys. But the new guys are like, hey, I have this phone, I'm right here, why don't I do it now? And so that's been a real godsend. And then everybody uses it now that we've opened it up to everybody. I mean, engineering projects, they save thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars moving trees, saving trees, which trees we're going to cut down, getting accurate bids for how much trees we're going to cut down. Planning and zoning uses it all the time for when they do corridor plans, things like that. A place I never thought it would show up was be disaster mitigation. When tornadoes come through or something, you may have emerald ash borer that you might have to deal with. Where do you put all that stuff? How do you clean it up? Another one that we're kind of running into is the emerald ash borer, and that's kind of becoming a big thing. So they just started planning for that, both departments. And then it also ties into stormwater management. So, I mean, those ash trees soak up a lot of water, and so they just don't want to clear cut them all and have places that didn't necessarily flood. So, and then the list just kind of goes on. This inventory kind of started and evolved from a handful of attributes to now like 32 different fields. And this is to kind of make it simpler for the users and not digging down so much on a drop down for those domains, because what we were finding is people wouldn't want to dig through 20, 30 things on a drop down on a domain to find what they wanted. And so now we just kind of broke those up into more logical, I guess, categories and kept the list shorter. And then it just kind of, and then moving it to ArcGIS Online, you can kind of limit which ones you want them to actually edit so that different people can edit different things and or everything if you want them to. We added some new disease tracking, specifically for emerald ash borer, Dutch elm disease, things like that, instead of hunting and pecking, like I said, through that big list of, well, it says disease. And so they can give more of an accurate count of like when it started or if it started or things like that. And then the guys wanted to do their own queries, and so I helped them set up those, and they can run their own reports, and kind of made it more simple by extracting those things that we wanted to. Here's kind of the list of attributes we keep. Some of them are generic, others of them, like the disease types, are more disease specific. So this is kind of the workflow we would do. And it started, and it kind of just evolved now that everybody has their smartphones. And how I kind of got it started was I actually installed it on the department heads, because each one of those have a smartphone and a data plan. And they wanted to try to work in the disconnected environment, and then all of a sudden they went, well, I can do this live? I'm like, well, sure you can. And then all of a sudden they started building on that, and then, well, I don't want to give my phone up to go do this, so then they got tablets and phones coming for the other guys. Everything's secured services because we have our own GIS servers and things like that, and we don't necessarily keep it in the cloud. The group thing is great because you can lock down who your users are, and if you don't want anybody to even see that there's editors, then they don't have to see it. But everybody then draws off that common source. Pictures is a big thing. They keep wanting to take pictures, more and more pictures. So every tree may have 2 or 3 pictures depending on, start of life, next in thing, and move on. We were running into kind of an issue with the precision, and so we started going with, we budgeted for a new GOXT, or now it's 7X, with a rangefinder so that we can get the precision that we wanted, especially when we were in denser areas. We were having issues with accuracy, especially when trees are only 2-3 feet apart, 4 feet apart, and you're like, which one is it? And they're the same kind of tree, same kind of size type thing. And then we pushed out a lot of web maps and redid those so that the supervisors could look at it on their tablets or their computers or however they wanted to connect. And if needs be, they could add their own features or records. I learned a lot, as Jeff and John have kind of already illustrated, so I don't want to rehash too many of those things. So this is kind of be brief. We invested a lot into planning ahead of time before we started creating data, and especially once we started evolving the data from those handful, we kind of sat down and broke it up and things like that. And I found out that the users weren't using it the way I thought they were going to use it. So I had to take that into account. So I demoed a lot of things and came back to them with schemas and, hey, does this domain work? Does this not work? And they're like, well, okay, and got a lot of feedback. And we ended up with those shorter drop downs and more fields, and that's how we kind of did it. I offloaded a lot of my involvement by doing that and then pushing it to collector. So I didn't have to go out every spring and fall and go, here's our new planting sites, here's our new trees. They just do it themselves, and which is really great because then it's right back in there. But I have to still stay familiar with what they're doing, and I don't want to let them off the leash too much because this is brand new. So that's that. And then I got them doing their own reports. I showed them how to do that in ArcGIS Desktop and things like that. And then what the managers are figuring out is, holy cow, instead of taking like a day or two to go through all the paper and put it all together, he just goes query, done, print, and here it is. And it's got a lot of buy-in from the council and things like that for developing those plans for mitigating emerald ash borer, or hey, how many are we going to plant, or things like that, because there's data backing it up that's actually solid and well maintained. Another issue that we kind of ran into was kind of that standardized, how do we maintain it? Because we did transition from the paper and then the GOXT going out there, kind of that disconnected environment. So it would either sit there and nobody would sync it or things like that. Well, in this, now that it's live, it just is there, and then we can compress it when we need to and post and reconcile and things like that. So everybody's on the same page. I had figured out who's paying the bill, just as Jeff indicated they wanted to do that on the cheap. But I kind of laid it out and said, here's your plans. We could do this or we could do that. And after I just showed them on their phones that it's right there, and they saw that blink, they're like, okay, we're on board with that. So I started with a few users and the department heads that seemed on board, and then just kind of built it from there. I invested some in training, especially with the users that claim to be not tech savvy. I sat down with them and kind of held their hand for a while, but after that, they're going full bore, and as Jeff indicated, they're showing each other how to do stuff, and it really went from there. So my presentation was kind of short and sweet, since Jeff and John kind of stole my thunder, and I don't want to rehash everything. So, any questions?
What kinds of things short, like tree species?
For trees?
Yeah.
So we have over 90 different species of trees for deciduous, and then 24 for coniferous pine trees. So
you have a separated these other fields?
yeah, it's actually subtypes. We have subtypes for those things. We have it for deciduous, the conifers, the planting sites, and then they kind of went into like topping and things like that. Because they don't consider it a tree once it's been topped because it's on the execution list. So it's just kind of their quick way of looking at it as this is, now it's going to be soiled, and then we're going to recycle it as a planting site.
So when you drop down this, you have all 90?
Yeah, that's kind of the downside, but they're really specific on what they want because it comes on the little tag and they want that information in there.
So that's one of the fields that...
Yep, those two are, that one is kind of the longest one of the bunch. And then we're paring down some of the conditions and things like that, the defect list, to more specific defects instead of just disease, because we moved that to what type of disease, so that we can, we're actually looking at getting an arborist, at least part-time, to kind of do this, and then be also part of the maintenance crews and stuff when they're not doing that. And then, you know, they may have more specific requirements or things like that.
How many defects are you in?
We have about 18. So, like I said, we pulled out some of those for the diseases because it just said disease or like Dutch elm, and then it got, well, what constitutes a disease versus Dutch elm, and data consistency is what we were going for.
And you have multiple. You put in new planting.
Typically, they just kind of go off what's already in the inventory. They can do it if they want to. Sometimes they go out and they want that precise location, but even when the guys dig in, it may move 2 or 3 feet. So we haven't quite worked out that workflow yet, but typically they just recycle what's already there. If they ground it out, and they may move it a few feet. So it's in the area, and they'll update the spatial location when we're going through and kind of redoing our spatial accuracy. I don't know where it went, but so
That people visit the same set of times.
no, typically it's just one person that's kind of the crew chief that's in and started. This is kind of this is kind of how we have it broken down. The pink is the park trees, and the greens are the street trees, and that's anything in the right-of-way. As I kind of indicated before, the park department does do like the campus, the community campus, things like that, those kind of trees. And then, so here's all like, you know, it just tells you what that. And then the other big thing that was handy was addressing for the right-of-way trees. Then they just print out a work order, and guys that don't want to carry around a tablet or smartphone or don't want to use it still have that paper copy, and I'm going to this address and I'm cutting down this tree kind of thing. So we kind of keep track of all that stuff. And then here's that picture I was talking about. So it kind of gives them a little reference from when they're looking at that kind of angle, what we're doing and what we're looking at. They're doing it in ArcGIS. That's something we can look at and potentially going to do, but we're kind of a heavy desktop shop still, and we're slowly making transitions to things. They're comfortable in that environment, and that's how we're going to kind of stay for now. Yeah, they're all attachments, and so you can add as many as you want to that point, or things like that when you go to edit. So the original place was just a link in the database, and then getting them to do that, but they have the tools now to create a table that imports that from that link into but we found that it didn't quite take all of them, and so I had to manually go back and enter a couple hundred of them, because for whatever reason the link was broke or the name got changed or people monkey with that particular place. So. That's actually the next kind of phase is we kind of haven't figured out how to merge them all together, but they do have a sidewalk maintenance, and that's another separate thing. And then there's a field in there that says damaged by a public tree versus a private tree, and that's kind of where we track that part. So it's not a conjoined data set, I guess.
How do you track? The property owner?
Yeah, so if it's caused by your thing, you got to fix it. If it's by us, it's on us to fix. And so that was kind of in the little set they came up with, is public versus private damage to the thing. Yeah, that really shows up in the park. Wildwood is a good example, or even the forest, their little arboretum. We only track a handful of trees that they may find worthy to track. Maybe they're really old or they were planted by somebody special. But, I mean, there's some along the trails in here that are noteworthy for whatever reason. And, but most of the time we just say, let it go. And, you know, if we find that may be the next step is getting some of those as emerald ash borer or something becomes more prevalent. If it is even there at all, we don't know, because it takes an incubation period. But cool. Thanks.